The Divine Dilemma Regarding Life and Death. Section 2. The making of the world and the creation of all things have been taken differently by many, and each has propounded as each has wished. Some say that all things have come into being spontaneously and as by chance, such as the Epicureans who, according to themselves, fantasize that there is no providence over the universe, speaking in the face of the clear and apparent facts. For if all things came into being spontaneously without providence, as they claim, all things would necessarily have simply come into being and be identical and without difference. Everything would have been as a single body, sun or moon, and regarding human beings, the whole would have been a hand or eye or foot. But now this is not the case. We see here the sun, there the moon, there the earth, and again regarding human bodies, here a foot, there a hand, and there a head. Such order indicates that they did not come into being spontaneously, but shows that a cause preceded them from which one can apprehend the God who ordered and created all things. So let's pause there because we're going to find that as you take a look, section 2 is a little bit more lengthy. And so what we find that the making of the world and the creation of all things is here kind of the subject of this section. And he says here that they have been taken differently by many. And this is an important thing for us to take a look at because what we're also actually going to find in this particular section is that he's going to explore a few of the different approaches that people have taken to the creation of the world. And so, of course, already in the previous book or treatise, he has explained that the Word was the one through whom all things were created. And so what we find here is that this then is going to be some of those people that have argued against that particular claim. And he says they've done so as each has wished. So, for instance, he says, some say that all things have come into being spontaneously and by chance. And so this is going to be the view of the Epicureans. And so what we can do here is just kind of make note of the fact that the first, we'll call it number 1 here, the Epicureans, and the Epicureans say all things come into being spontaneously and by chance. So it's just a simple way for us to highlight the very first view. And of course, he's going to go on and argue against this. He says they fantasize there is no providence, something overseeing this process, speaking in the face of clear and apparent facts. And so as he's shown in the previous work, there are clear and apparent facts for Athanasius that it was created, that providence did oversee this act and initiate this act and complete this act. So the Epicureans are wrong. And he gives an example here. So 4 is marking for us this particular argument that he's going to make. All right. So the reason, we could say reason against Epicurean view. What's the reason for that? And it relates to the, ultimately we'll just call it the differentiation of all things. Because what we would find then is something identical and without difference, right? If the Epicureans were correct, this is what we would find, but in fact we do not find that. Notice he gives examples. Here the sun, there the moon, there the earth. Regarding human bodies, we don't have just feet or just hands. There's differentiation even within the human body, and of course the human person is differentiated from the sun, moon, and everything else. And so, and in fact, he says such order indicates that they did not come into being spontaneously. And so part of his argument here is not just the differentiation of all things. We might even see kind of reason number 2, which is that order in the universe and within the things in the universe points to design, perhaps, purpose, certainly not spontaneity. Okay. So that's what we find here is the first view against the Epicureans. So let's continue. Others amongst whom is Plato, that giant among the Greeks, declare that God made the universe from pre-existent and uncreated matter. So we'll pause there just for a second, and we notice that we've moved on now to Plato. And Plato is going to be, for us, number 2. So number 1 was the Epicureans. Number 2 is now Plato. What does Plato say? That God made the universe from pre-existent and uncreated matter. And we see that right here. Oops. And moving on from there then, as God is not able to make anything unless matter pre-existed, just as a carpenter must already have wood so it may be used. So he's saying from Plato's point of view, what we have is God as an artisan or a craftsman, I should say, working with previously existent materials. All right. They do not realize that saying such things is to impute weakness to God. And so for Athanasius, this view that God is merely a craftsman using previously existent materials is a weakness. For if he is not himself the cause of the matter, so he must be the one who created the matter to begin with, but simply makes things from pre-existent matter, then he is weak, not being able without matter to fashion any of the things that exist, just as the weakness of the carpenter is certainly his inability to make any required thing without wood. According to the argument, unless there were matter, God would not have made anything. How would he still then be called maker and creator if he had his ability to make from something else, from the matter? And if this is so, as they thus have it, according to them, God is only a craftsman and not the creator of being, if he fashions underlying matter, but is not himself the cause of the matter. So if this is true, all right, so this is kind of our logical statement. If this, then what? Well, then it would be true that God is only a craftsman and not the creator of being. So this is itself, in some ways, the then statement. So, if he fashions underlying matter but is not himself the cause of the matter, then he's only a craftsman and not the creator of being. He could in no way be called creator if he does not create matter from which created things come into being. So, created things come into being by the fashioning of matter, but if he did not create the initial matter, then God is in some ways weak and is merely a craftsman and not the creator. He's saying this is Plato's view, second view, that God made the universe from pre-existent and uncreated matter, but he is rejecting that view. Here we come then in the third paragraph to a third view. Others again, from the heretics, fabricate for themselves another creator of all things beside the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, being greatly blinded even in what they say. So here's our third view right here. In this case, he just calls them others. And what do others say? Another creator besides the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. And so here we have number 3. For now, we'll call them others. And what do the others say? The others say that there is another creator besides the Father of Christ. All right. He says, for the Lord said to the Jews, have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and will cleave to his wife, and the two will be one flesh. Then, referring to the Creator, he says, what God has put together, let not man put asunder. How then do they introduce a creation alien to the Father? For if, according to John, encompassing all things in saying, all things were made by him, and without him was nothing made, how could there be another creator besides the Father of Christ? And so he goes back here to the Gospel of John. He goes back even to Matthew, and he's saying, even in Matthew, it's referring back to the Creator, what God has put together. And so his argument here is trying to lead us to the idea that what John has done in John 1:1, if you recall, is in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And so all things were made by God through the Word. Even John's language in the beginning echoes the creation account in Genesis. And so what John is saying is that the creation account in which we see God, and then in chapter 2 especially of Genesis, Yahweh as creator, we find that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this God, Yahweh, revealed as the covenant God of Israel, is in the Old Testament the creator of everything. And that God is the same God who is the Father, through his eternal Word or Son, made all things. And then even in Genesis, we see the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the waters. So for Athanasius, this Trinitarian idea of Father, Son, and Spirit all involved in the creative process. The Father speaking, the Son as the agent of creation, the Spirit there in Genesis as the superintendent, you might say, hovering over the face of the waters. And so this is what's going on here in this section. And so we could say others. Now, there's a lot more that can go into this. When we speak of others, there are some heretics that could come to mind. There's a guy named Marcion, and Marcion was a heretic related to Gnosticism. Gnosticism was a heresy saying that, well, it said a lot of things, but that the Spirit was good, but the material world was evil. And so for Marcion, he said that the Old Testament God, Yahweh, was evil because, of course, he is the one who created all things. And so he tried to make a distinction in the New Testament by saying that the Father of Jesus Christ was not the same as the creator of the Old Testament. And so it's quite possible Marcion was in the 2nd century. It's quite possible that Athanasius has Marcion in mind, and some of the Marcionites and other Gnostic heretics that followed his views. But there are other heresies beyond just Marcion that may have argued something similar. And so for our sake, we'll call it others, but you could be aware of Marcion and Gnosticism as those who may have tried to make a distinction between the Father of Jesus and the Old Testament God, Yahweh. And that's the end of section 2.